Hello, 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 hello. Good now to you wherever, whenever, and however you are. Hello, my name is Ryan Erickson. We are here with BetaCodex Live. I am pleased to be here with our my companion of news and note and intellectual stellar brilliance, Mr. Niels Flagging. I tried to
If
figure
you
that
say
out.
so, Ryan,
If
it must be true, right?
if I say so, yes. Well, welcome, as always, Niels. And we have a guest today, as we do occasionally, a Mr. Ian Fraser. Glenday will bring Ian to the stage. Hello.
Good
All
morning.
right. Good morning.
Really good to have you, Ian.
Right.
Yeah. So I would like to start off with this, maybe, and toss this to you, Niels, and say, how did you come to know Ian? And then maybe Ian can say who you are, what you are, and how you navigate the world. So
Okay.
Yeah.
that's my invitation.
Yeah, let me start a little how this connection came along, right? If you asked how I know Ian, I think the really correct thing would be to say we don't know each other yet. This is the get to know, the first encounter really. But we had a few exchanges in written form, and I was first hinted at Ian's brilliant work and the lean RFS approach a couple of months ago by a client here in Germany. And they were already, this client, pretty sizable mass consumer goods fabrication, plant. They are already using lean RFS. They were using it partially, not in all their operations, not in all their production, not consistently throughout all their production side, but they had started to use it a couple of months before. And when they told me about lean RFS, and they had this book lying around, many copies actually, the brilliant book by Ian Fraser Glenday. His second book, I think, correct me, Ian, if I'm wrong, your second book. The first is called, it has an even better title, I think. The first was called Breaking Through to Flow, which I think is a wonderful title.
Yeah.
Wonderful title. Huh? And this lean RFS, repetitive flexible supply, putting the pieces together. And if I'm not mistaken, both these books, the first and this one, the second, were awarded with the Shingo Award.
Yeah.
Which is like the lean publication award in a way, I would say. So congratulations, Ian. When I first heard about this and saw the book, I thought, this must be damn boring. And I told my client, no. And she said, no, it's really good. It's really easy. And you don't have to read the full thing. You will get it if you read only half of it. And everything I heard from my client about this book was true. It's highly readable, totally interesting, totally different than what I expected. So my prejudice was terrible at the first. My first judgment was totally inappropriate and inadequate. I was converted just by reading a couple of articles on your website, Ian. There are two lovely short intros to lean RFS that you published there. One is an excerpt from this book. I think the other one is an article by a colleague of yours or a client. So I think it's now with hindsight, I would say it's very easy to get into this, but we have the creator of the lean RFS approach here. Ian, lovely that you're joining us.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Fantastic work. I must say, I was so impressed when I read this book that I immediately, got in touch with you and wrote something to you, or got in touch with you on LinkedIn, at least to be connected.
Yeah.
And this does not happen often.
That is true. That is true. Usually, I like to say that most lean approaches are shit, and that stuff is bad and shallow and hollow, and so. And I can say none of that about your work. And it's
in the years that I've known you, Niels, I have not seen you as lit up about an area and a topic and as lean RFS. So, Ian, if you want to, I'll put you on stage so you can give us, those of us who may not be familiar with the approach, a 60 to 120 second. What is it and why is it important?
But let me frame it a little for you, Ian. If I understand correctly, you developed the fundamental approach, lean RFS approach, already in the 1980s, 80s or end of the 70s?
1980s, yeah.
1980s, yeah.
Yeah.
At Kimberly-Clark, not sure if that's correct to say.
No.
It was before Kimberly-Clark.
No,
Kimberly-Clark is the big case in the book. Yeah, but you
Yes.
developed it at an employer of yours, actually,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And then when did you give the name to this concept?
Okay. There's a lot of questions there. Right. So just to clarify, Kimberly-Clark was a company I worked with as an independent, and
Yes,
we made unbelievable improvements in their operations.
yes,
And
very well described, by the way.
yeah, and it was their chief executive, Tom Fawkes, said to me and Rick Sather. Rick Sather worked for Kimberly-Clark and was my main contact. And Tom Fawkes, the CEO, said, I want you two guys to write this down. He said, I want everybody in the company to understand what we did to get these results, right? I don't want you people coming in and diluting what we've done. So Tom Fawkes said to me, Ian, you sit with Rick, write the book, and I will allow you to name Kimberly-Clark in the book. Now, Kimberly-Clark, the book is not about Kimberly-Clark. It's just, there's a lot of examples, real examples from Kimberly-Clark. There's a lot of other examples from big multinational companies as well, who would not allow me to name them in the book. However, can you turn the book around, please? Right? Because on the back page, there was a whole series of quotations from companies, right? Where the company allowed me to name the person, their job title, and the company they work for. So
Let
all
me see
the
what
companies
companies
listed on the back, like Philip Morris, Carlsberg, right? Grant's Whiskey, all of those companies, those Kraft, Mondelez, those companies are the examples, the anonymous examples in the book, but the back page tells you who they are, right?
That's brilliant.
Now, Lean RFS, right? RFS stands for repetitive, flexible supply, right? Opposites, right? You can't be repetitive and flexible at the same time. My argument is you absolutely should, right? Because my argument is you shouldn't apply the same logic to the planning of all the products. You should look at which ones you should do repetitively and which ones you should do flexibly, right?
Yes.
And don't mix them up, right? Whereas most companies mix their products up in their planning process the whole time, and they're trying to apply the same logic to products with very, very different characteristics, right? I mean, characteristics in terms of their sales demand, their volatility, and that sort of thing.
Yes. Well, may I interrupt? May I interrupt for a second? I think this is such a brilliant concept or suggestion. Can I reframe it a little bit, or try to reframe it a little bit?
Sure.
Instead of planning everything, you repetitize and you flexibilize some two different product groups: the green and the red products.
We haven't got onto what are greens yet. Your listeners don't know what greens are yet.
Yeah. But that's I wanted to build a bridge. I want to build a bridge to that concept. You in the concept in Lean RFS, you distinguish between two kinds of products: the frequent volume products, or the few high volume products that every organization has, the green products, and you suggest to repetitize them. It's not a word, I think, but let's create it. And the red products, which are more products quantitatively, but lower volume usually, or all of regularly, they become flexibilized. So the green products become repetitized and the red products flexibilized. One might say that you suggest what I think is one of the brilliant cornerstones.
Well, let me explain something about how a key thing of how it happened, right? When I used to be employed a long time ago, right?
The enzyme thing.
I was working for a company in Europe where they had factories in every country in Europe, right? And each factory produced all the products for that country, which to me seemed absolutely bloody stupid, right? So what I was wanting to do was to create central factories that produced a limited range of products for all the European countries. I brought together all the MDs of the European countries, and what I was going to show them was Pareto analysis. You know, the 80-20 rule, 20% of the products are 80% of the volume. And in those days, there was no such things as laptops, right? There was mainframes, and they used to, and there was no such things as, TV screens that you could look at, right? So you used to get big printouts from the computer. And I asked every MD to bring a printout of all their products listed from the highest volume to the lowest volume. And then I asked them to put them up against the wall of the conference room, gave them a felt tip pen each. And I said, I want you to go down until you reach 20% of the products, draw a line, and what is the percent of the volume, which I knew was going to be 80%. Pareto. And because all of these MDs were largely either ex-marketing men or accountants, I thought they won't know what Pareto analysis is, the 80-20 rule. To my utter amazement, when they put these sheets hanging down on the wall, suddenly my eye went zap. There was a much, much more important figure than 80-20, right?
Yes.
Hanging down on the wall without a felt tip, I could just see a line going right the way down. There was 13 of these hanging down, right? And the line was 6% of the products was 50% of the volume. And I went, oh my God, Pareto, forget Pareto.
Exactly. The reality is more extreme than that, right?
This, and everyone was exactly the same. It was maybe 5.9 or 6.2, but it was nigh-ons. And then I realized there was two other lines as well. And the next line was 50% of the products, 95% of the volume. Right?
Yeah.
That's
so this is one of the brilliant insights.
You've got 99% of the volume, right? Sorry. 70% of the volume, 99% of the products. 99% of the products deliver 70% of the volume, which means 1% of the product, so 1% of the volume sales is 30% of the products. 30% of the products only are 1% of the sales. Incredible. Yeah. So that's when I called it the Glenday sieve. And that 6% of the products, that's 50% of the volume, is I called it the greens. The 94% of the products, the other 50% of the volume, I called the reds. Because I think most human beings understand green, good, red, bad.
Yeah, or at least should be handled differently.
Flexible. Sorry.
Yeah, brilliant. Brilliant insight. And the second genius idea, I think, for all kind of production companies that produce not individual, let's say, that do some kind of volume production, small batches or large batches or so, that they should, what I call slotification, to slotify their work. You call it to create cycles, repetitive cycles that repeat every 2 weeks or weekly, or even better.
Weekly's better. Weekly's better than 2 weeks, because you're trying to create.
The smaller the better. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you combine this idea of distinguishing between the green products, the frequent few, and the red products, which is the large amount of products that have lower volumes.
At this point, right, it's very important to understand something else. Right. Most planning systems are based on what's called batch logic, or economic order quantities, which is based on the understanding, like, economies of scale. Bigger batches, fewer changeovers, the factory will run more efficiently.
Yes.
And that was certainly true for a long time, right? Certainly true. When there was very, very few products. Right?
In the industrial age, right?
Yes.
Basically.
But as more and more products came along, and most companies, their portfolio has exploded in products, right? As you do more products, you can't do bigger and bigger batches, right? Or you have to build more and more warehouses, which is what a lot of companies have done, right? And these are expensive, certainly total waste. So with repetitive flexible supply, where you try and produce the bigger volume products on a very frequent absolutely fixed, repetitive cycle, ideally weekly, right?
Yes.
You get another phenomenon. Quite frankly, a phenomenon that I did not expect to happen until I did it originally because it made my job easier. I was
As a
running
planner.
a factory, right,
Your
where
job
I
as a
was the planning manager and the production manager. And for me to have a repeating cycle for half the volume, a repeating plan every week, it made my job easier, right?
Basically, you stumbled upon this,
Yes.
these tremendous insights through
Yes.
laziness.
And then suddenly, exactly, I'm a lazy planner, right? Lazy planners are good, right? I wanted to go home on time. Most planners work late. It was a shock, a real shock to me when the operators in the factory said, Ian, this system's great. What are you talking about? Well, when we come to work, we know what we're going to be doing. What? Said Monday morning we come in, we know already what we're going to be making. Said in the old world, we never knew. Every day we came in, it was a different plan. We never knew what we were going to be doing. So there was no point preparing on Friday for Monday morning because the chances are the plan would change. Now we come in on a Monday, we know exactly what we're doing because every week it's the same. Oh, so you actually like that, do you? Yeah, of course we like it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And because every Monday morning was the same, the startup happened quicker because they knew what they were doing, right? And the startup happening quicker, not only did it start quicker, but the machines were already set up on the standards on what to run. So suddenly things got better and better and better, right? And they said, we really like this. That's when I thought, hang on a minute, we've got to give this a name, right? Got to give this. So the old batch logic was called economies of scale.
Yeah.
I called this economies of repetition, right?
Beautiful concept.
Beings
Beautiful.
love repetition, right? Think about how much you use repetition in your own life. You know, housewife goes and does the shopping. Actually, in my house, I do it. But anyway, right?
And I do it.
Very often, the housewives will have two shopping lists. One shopping list is always the same because she always wants cheese and milk and eggs and cereals and all that stuff. And one shopping list is what's different for this week. That's repetitive, flexible, right? Most people doing the weekly shopping don't sit down at the, and say, well, what are we going to have this week? I've got no idea. None whatsoever. Most people know there's a certain amount of stuff that's the same every week. And that's what they get, right?
I wonder, Ian, if the way you tell this story, and I've seen you telling it in other videos that are available on YouTube, it seems like you stumbled upon the practice and then figured out the philosophy afterwards. Was it really like that, or did you have the ideas firsthand?
No. The original thing was that the factory I ran, which was a small factory, highly technical, which was deep culture fermentation of bacteria to produce enzymes. Right? I'm a microbiologist. I was qualified as a microbiologist. So I got the job in the factory because I was a microbiologist, because they were doing deep culture fermentation of bacteria to use enzymes. Right? Highly technical. And it was an absolute chaotic environment. Absolutely chaotic. Everything was variable, right? Everything. Fermentation times, orders, everything, right? And I just thought I had to get a stake in the ground, something that would be stable that I could then build from, right? I won't bore you with what I did in the stake, but I got something stable. And from that point,
it's slots.
From that point, things started to get better, right? Because something was stable, yeah?
You mean the time was stable, right?
Yes, it was actually. I mean, just very quickly. Because the fermentation, the plant ran 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, 51 weeks a year, right? Because fermentations, just don't work 9 till 5, yeah? And everything was variable. The old philosophy was the equipment was very expensive and therefore keep the equipment busy, right? So when a fermenter was finished, drain it, clean it, fill it, sterilize it, inoculate it, go again. Keep the equipment busy, right? Which meant the inoculation could happen any time of the day or night. And the inoculation, I decided, was the most critical thing, because that was when you get, rogue bacteria in that would infect the brew, that would ruin it, right? So I made it, every inoculation I personally would do at 9 o'clock in the morning. Yeah, 9 o'clock. So if the brew was ready to go, the fermenter had been filled up and sterilized, and it was ready to go, 11 o'clock at night, it would stand idle until 9 o'clock in the morning when I came to work and inoculated it. What I didn't expect to happen was suddenly, because I was in control of the most critical step, fermentation times became more consistent. Yield rates went up, right? All the operators knew what was doing. We could then build a fixed plan from that 9 o'clock, right? And because now the fermentation times were more stable, I could predict much more accurately when they were going to finish, right? And yield rates went up. It was fantastic. The manufacturing director of that company, there were 6 factories in the company. I was just a very small factory. He came to see me one day to find out why my results had got so good all of a sudden.
Yeah.
He was a horrible man. And I sat in my office and I very enthusiastically explained to him what I was doing, and we leave the fermenters empty, and 9 o'clock we inoculate them, and it doesn't matter whether the fermenters sat there for 12 hours or whatever, better. And then I realized he was looking at me horrified.
Yeah.
What the hell are you doing? He said, that's not the efficient way of running things. The efficient way is keep the machines busy, right? Yeah. I said, but my way, I get better results. He said, you must be fiddling the results. It can't be true. I'm not. Honestly, I'm not fiddling the results. That's what's happening, right? He said,
so you encountered...
Go back to the old way. And I said, okay, I'll go back to the old way. Can you give me a few minutes, though? Why? Because I'm about to write my resignation letter.
And did you do it?
Because I'm leaving.
Did you leave?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah. I went and did an MBA, and because I didn't know anything about accounts, marketing, all that sort of stuff. And
an MBA would have been the perfect time to find the connections between your approach to work and, let's say, Deming's and Toyota and so on. Did you figure that out, that connection at the time?
Well, it was. I then, after my MBA, I joined a pharmaceutical company, mainly because of one guy, a guy called Dr. Bill Walsh, who was the most brilliant guy I've ever met. He was such a mentor of mine. He was just a fantastic guy, and he invited me to join and said, and told him a bit about my sort of theories. And he said, well, come and see come and do some of it with us. And this was in about 1982. And I've been there about a year, and we were running RFS, pretty successfully. And he then came up with this article that he'd read from Toyota also. Right?
Yes.
And in it, they talked about Hayunka.
Yes.
Which in English is level production. And he said, Ian, he said, this sounds kind of like what you're doing. Yeah. Really? I've never, I just invented this stuff, I don't know. Anyway, I read it. I said, yeah, it does kind of sound similar. He said, well, go out there and find out. I said, what? He said, you got a passport, haven't you? Yeah. He said, well, go out to Japan and find out. Really?
So you went to Japan at the time, at the start of the beginning of the 80s.
We contacted, at the time it was Imai, who wrote the book, what's it called? Shingo. And so I went out to Japan, and that's where I met this marvelous man called Iwata, who was running the Toyota system out to their suppliers. We were actually in a bar one night having a beer, and I said to him about RFS. I mean, we had a translator, obviously, because I don't speak Japanese and he doesn't speak English. And I said, now, slogan is every product every week, because that was the simple slogan. I wanted every product every week. Right?
Yes.
And he said, what did you say? I said, every product every week. And he said, describe it to me. So I described it to him, and he said, what you're talking about is Hayunka. I said, what the fuck's Hayunka? Sorry, right? And he said, it's a 5-step process. You don't know that, do you? I said, no. As far as I'm concerned, it's a 1-step process, and I'm doing it, right?
Yes.
Every product every week.
Yes.
he then drew on the beer mat all 5 steps, right? Which is what's in the book, right? Exactly as he drew on the beer mat. So he drew 3 products, A, B, C, with a demand of 100, 200, 300 in the month. And he showed the 5 steps. So step 1 was to make every product every 2 weeks, right? Or it's called every product every cycle. Then they halved the batches, doubled the changeovers, and went to, funnily enough, their slogan was exactly the same, every product every week, exactly the same as mine, right?
Yeah.
Because that was what it was described.
Yeah.
The next step, which was stunned me, right, was they then went to daily cycles. So now they they reduced the batch sizes, right, by a factor of 2.5, and they increased the changeovers by a factor of 5, and they still got more efficient.
Yeah.
Right. And that was when I won't bore you with step 3 and step 4 and step 5, but they were running these very fast repeating cycles, right? Now, I had an interesting conversation with John Shook. Do you know John Shook? Yeah. John Shook was the first American ever employed by Toyota in Japan. I mean, John speaks fluent Japanese. He's married to a Japanese girl. He was fascinated by everything Japanese, lived in Japan.
He is behind the famous Nummy case in America.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Because they grabbed him in Toyota in Japan when they realized he spoke Japanese, knew nothing about car manufacturing. They thought, but was American. And they thought, we are going to have to set up a manufacturing facility in America. And the Americans are not going to like being told by the Japanese what to do. But we've got an American. So they taught John everything there is about the Toyota system, and you're absolutely right, then sent him to America to set up Numi, right? So it was an American. Anyhow, but back to my story. I've had many conversations with John Shook, right, around this, and to clarify what I was saying was exactly the same as what Toyota did, right? You know, just at different times. And he said 2 things to me. One was, he said, you're the first person I've ever met that's just come up with this on their own. He said, I've never met anyone else that's come up with it on their own. I said, yeah, but the thing is, it's the same as Toyota, but Toyota didn't understand economies of repetition. And he said, oh, yes, we did. We absolutely knew the repeating cycle gave us what you call, Ian, economies of repetition. People get better and better and better and better and better at it, right? As they keep doing the same repeating cycle. He said, we just didn't give it a name, right? He said, you've given it a name, which is great. And I said to my wife about this, she said, well, thank goodness they never given it a name, Ian, because you wouldn't have had a career otherwise. Because
I mean, naming these concepts is so essential, right? Because it makes people understand, grab
exactly.
them, understand.
People understand economies of repetition. They understand human beings like repetitive, like they like stability and repetitiveness.
I would prefer to call it not repetitiveness, but reliability. It's a reliable way
that as well,
right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
It's highly reliable. It grows confidence and focus on the learning, on the improvement, on lead time reduction.
And it's not, the point is, I mean, you call it the drumbeat, right? I mean, in Lean, make a lot about the word tact time, right? Tact time.
Yes.
And everybody talks about tact time, right? Now, you're German, aren't you, Niels?
Yes.
Yes. So everybody thinks tact time is a Japanese word, but it's not, right? Do you know what language it is?
Oh yeah, it was inspired by German language.
It's German, right? Yeah. And what tact time actually is, right, in German, is in an orchestra, you know that machine, that metronome that goes tick, 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 that's tact time, right? So tact time is the drum beat for the orchestra all to follow. So everybody thinks tact time is a Japanese word. It's not, it's a German word, right? And what it means is drum beat. It's the drum beat, right? So if you've got a repeating fixed plan, that creates the drum beat for the orchestra. Only in this instance, the orchestra is the suppliers. So suddenly you're giving the suppliers a fixed repeating stable, reliable plan, which is something they never ever had before.
And by the way, you can, of course, when you say suppliers, do you mean production teams, or do you mean suppliers of the company doing the drum beat?
I mean suppliers of the company. So, yeah, the people supplying the materials and the packaging and everything else.
You create rhythm throughout the whole value creation process,
Correct.
right? From suppliers to outward logistics and so on. Delivery.
Exactly. You roll it out to the customer so that you start delivering to them. The trucks are the same trucks on the same days at the same time with the same products in the same quantities for the greens.
Yes.
Right? For the greens. So you now have a drum beat, the same drum beat across the whole supply chain, right? Which is about the direct opposite of what was before. Right?
Yes. And it makes inventories shrivel. Delivery becomes much more frequent.
Yeah.
Cycles become much shorter, and teams learn that this reliable green cycle works and that they can perfect it and what they have to do to make it perfect.
Yeah. In the book, Kimberly-Clark allowed me to publish lots and lots of real data. The one thing they would never allow me to publish, and wouldn't even tell me, was their reduction of finished goods inventory.
Yes, you write that in the book. Yes, it remained a secret to you.
And they said, Ian, we're not going to tell you that because you'll tell everybody. Yes, I know, I will. Yeah. Said, well, we don't want our competitors to know just what that finished goods inventory reduction was. But what I do know is they used to hire extensive outside warehouses, hire them. By the time we finished, there wasn't a single hired warehouse on the outside, right? Not one.
This is beautiful, Ian, that you mentioned this. I have a client currently that also has external warehouses so far for their finished goods, everything, and we agreed when we started the transformation work that one of the many aims should be to get rid of that external warehouse. Yeah, the need for external capacity, also to drive down, sickness leave, absenteeism, because I think what's beautiful, and you mentioned it in the book as well, is that satisfaction is also being raised by this kind of process. As people do not feel dependent on planners and managers and people steering and running and changing all the time, but they become reliable. They can rely on the rhythm and the slots, so to say, to give them confidence in their own capabilities, to build their capabilities.
Self-managed teams. People want self-managed teams. Well, it's very difficult with self-managed teams if you give them a different plan every week. Give them the same plan every week. They know what they're doing. They can manage themselves. Right. I mean, there's a case study in the book about a company I work for called Coleman's of Norwich, right? And we reached the point where we stopped measuring absenteeism because it was 0, 0, 0, 0 every week. Nobody took, sicky days, right? I mean, obviously we had like doctor's notes for serious illnesses, etc. But there was no what I would call absenteeism, which is just people not turning up for work, on a 1 or 2 days. That's not right, because the team said, look, the teams manage themselves. If they had somebody that was doing that, then they kicked them out of the team, or they said you can't do that anymore because it falls on us.
Yes.
They're holding you.
No,
I was just listening to all this, and Niels, you know me, and this, it's tempo, it's groove, in that you're swinging this point, you get better and better and better. I get better, you get better. It feels good, feels better, and then you can just totally groove with it. And that I don't need somebody telling me what to play, when to play, how to play it. I know it too much.
Let me give you an example, Ryan. One of the things is we fix the big changeovers to happen at the best time, right? So let's say Wednesday morning at 10 o'clock, right? For instance. So that's when the big changeover will happen. Always Wednesday morning at 10 o'clock. So people can prepare for it and they get better at it Now, I had a factory, right, where the factory manager said to me, I've been trying for years to get them to accurately measure the changeover times, right? So that I could when we did improvement work, I could see that the changeovers improved. They would never measure the changeover time very accurately, not accurate enough. Now, so we do it 10 o'clock every morning, Wednesday morning. And of course, the shifts rotate, the 3 shifts rotate, which means each Wednesday it's a different shift that's doing the changeover. He said now they measure the changeover to the second, because every week what they want to put on the graph is that they've done the changeover faster than it was done last week. We beat you. We beat you. Right? Yeah. It's called bragging rights. He said, and every week the shift comes in Wednesday morning. What's the time we got to beat this week? Right, let's go for it. Right? Yeah. Every week. Now, suddenly, to your point, Ryan, that means something to the operators. It makes them happy, right?
Yeah.
And
it's the joy in work. That's what we're talking about.
Yeah. That did it the week before. They said, well, you wait till we're back on Wednesday morning because we're going to beat you. Right? And it becomes a friendly, good rivalry. But the point is, the factory manager said to me, and every week that changeover gets faster and faster.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, what's behind this is that the practice of doing the changeovers is professionalized.
Yeah, standardized.
It turned into a science, so to speak, right? Into a whole scientific game as well. Standardized, improved continuously. There's Kaizen on the changeovers as well.
Yeah.
Which,
I mean, in the old
batch processing is usually a sloppy thing, right?
Yeah,
I have had that with many clients.
Where you get a different plan every week and it normally changes. One thing, you don't know when that changeover is going to happen, right? It moves, right? And because of that, you don't know how many people you're going to have available to help you with the changeover, right? Because it might be 3 a.m. or whatever, right? So every shift will have their own way of doing the changeover, right? Yeah. And it doesn't matter how much you've written standards. Nobody reads the bloody standards on how to do the changeover. They all have their own way of doing it, right? They can't all be the best. Yes. That's impossible. Right? But when you know it's always Wednesday morning at 10 o'clock, now you can start looking at how each changeover is done. And now the operators actually want to standardize because they want to beat the other shift.
And they want to keep their slots safe, right? They have to protect the green green slots, so to say.
Yeah.
And this way also the individual mastery increases and increases, and the communication increases between the people. They want to get better, and that the friendly competition, we talk about that in BetaCodex, and that there's these agreements that and it's this friendly, not I'm going to do this because I need my bonus and I'm going to get my bonus, so screw you. It's about we are with each other, for each other, and we're all getting better together, and it just feels like wow.
Yeah,
what a
absolutely. And it really does build a very positive culture, within it. And like I said, that reflected in absenteeism. We didn't have any, right?
I might mention another beautiful concept, beautifully named concept as well, that you not sure if you created the term or where it comes from, but that made me get another understand your concept, the lean RFS concept more fully. I think is the idea of white space. I just love that white space. So what I understand what it is for. Okay, you might get faster and faster over time. You might you reduce the throughput, the time you need for production, the time you need for setups and changeovers and so on. And so what happens if you are faster than expected and what you call this overtime, this rest that you have, this time that you do not need because you were faster than planned. You call it white space. So I think the idea is we have to accept that if you have a drumbeat production, value creation, then white space will occur. Sometimes the process will be faster. So you should never anticipate start the next step, the next production.
No. If you keep pulling production, if you get better and you pull the next production forward, right, then you've ruined the drumbeat. Yeah, you've absolutely ruined the drumbeat.
Yes.
So better just to stop and wait. Now, when I say this to companies, they're like, "You want me to do what?
Exactly.
Stop the line and wait."
Yes.
You're mad, you're mad. I said, no, because we want to keep the repetition. We want to keep, and I said, it's really
predictability, the reliability of the process is
sustainable
really
pace.
started to white space as well.
Right. You do two things, right? Number one, measure the white space, right? Because each week the white space should get bigger and bigger, right?
Yeah.
And number two, have a plan in place on what you're going to do with the people in the white space, right?
Yeah.
Well, the story in the book is about a brewing company in Denmark, right? Who rang me up after 5 or 6 weeks and said, everybody thinks we're complete lunatics. They ran 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, right? And they agreed that they put the white space on a Sunday, yeah? So it would build during the week to Sunday, and then they'd start the fixed plan again on Monday. And I said, why, what's the problem? He said, we got 27 hours of white space this week. 27 hours. I said, I told you need a plan on what to do. They said, we expected maybe 15 or 20 minutes, not 27 hours. Right?
Yeah.
And of course, what then happens is that then when you plan the next cycle forward, you now adjust your output rates to take into account the higher rates that you're getting, right? So each time you're planning on higher rates, right, you need, so you absorb the white space back into the planning rates. Right?
Over time, yes. Over time, you reduce the size of the
slot. I had a factory when I used to be employed, right, as I like to say, and I had this one factory that went from a 7-day, 24-hour operation to a 5-day operation, right, because the amount of white space that was created.
By the way,
we still paid them exactly the same as if they were working 7 days, right? And I had huge arguments with the accountant, right, and the accountant and the personnel director saying, but we shouldn't pay them the same because they're doing it in less time. I said, but if we now cut their wages, they're going to
doing fast.
You. I said, it doesn't. They said, but the product's costing us more. I said, no, it's not costing us more because we're paying them exactly the same as we paid them before. It's just they make it faster and more efficient.
You incentivize the learning in a way, right? And that is a beautiful concept. By the way,
they then got weekends off, but lost no money. That was important.
We are currently with the client I'm working with, which the quest now is to do this transformation, this go live in a few weeks. In a way, it means a rollout of Lean RFS to the whole factory, to all the production process. Finally, it took them a while, as you know, and what they're currently in the stage, or they have designed the what we call the cell structure for this, how the teams will be set up to run these production cycles. So they have what we call periphery cells that will do the production process, run the production process from beginning to end, more or less. And what they discovered is that applying Lean RFS combined with these smaller team sizes, they can liberate a lot of, let's say, hidden capacity. They can unlock hidden capacities. That is one of the big secrets, I think, of Lean RFS, right? That by moving to more frequent production cycles, smaller batches, more reliable rhythm, or reliable drumbeat, reliable rhythm, and distinguishing between the greens and the reds. For example, one of the discussions at the client is that certain very, very huge, large production equipment, they will probably not be using it anymore. They will not be needing it anymore, simply by moving to a consistent Lean RFS approach, which is very interesting, right? Because they obviously had this philosophy of largest good.
Yep. I mean, that's one of the problems I face, that the equipment has been built for big batches, and I don't want big batches, right? So that can be a bit of a block, right?
Yeah, modularization is important for Lean RFS as well, as it has been for Toyota, as it has been in the Weichselbaum system, which I've worked with in German-speaking countries as well. So once you adopt this kind of concept, it pays off to modularize production lines, make them less highly automatized and more compact, connected, interlinked, so that
I think the other thing is is to realize that, okay, right. The greens are the big volume products, right? So they're probably made fairly frequently now. So when you look at the greens, the big volume equipment can actually be perfectly okay, right?
Mm-hmm.
The problem comes is because the company has spent a lot of money on the investment of that equipment, is they run all the products on that equipment, right?
Yeah.
So the 50%, the reds, the smaller volume things, get run on equipment that was built for high volume, which means the run lengths are very short, right? And the changeover is very frequent, right?
Yes.
The equipment,
and you create inventory behind
Yeah.
those large equipments usually, right?
So
You do that.
I've spent a lot of time looking around to find old equipment. There's normally a shed at the back of the factory with the old equipment in that was, ripped out. And I say, let's get this back into production, right? Why?
Yeah.
For the reds, because it's slow, it's not efficient, it's not automatic, it's only semi-automatic. I said, perfect for the reds. So
this is a good insight for my client work, by the way. I will discuss this with my client. This is brilliant. What you just said is a brilliant concept. Use
or if you can't find a shed with old equipment in, have they got a pilot plant, right? Because if they've got a pilot plant, it's like, let's use that
for the reds.
Yeah, for the reds, exactly. Yes. Small volume, and I mean, I've got videos from Kimberly-Clark, right, of during a workshop week of people bringing an old machine back out of their warehouse, back out of this, shed, into a production area that's not being used, and during the week getting it up and running again for the red products, so that by Monday morning they've got no facility. By Friday they're producing the reds on a new facility that we've made out of old equipment.
Interesting.
And by the way, the engineers love it, right? Oh, right. So let me get this straight then. You want me to get the old equipment in there running by Friday? Yeah. Budget? No budget. You spend what you need, right?
Yeah.
Plans, project plans? No project plans, right? You do what you need, right?
Yeah.
Approvals? You've got the approval.
Yeah.
We just do what we think. No, we're engineers. We know what to do. Yeah, you just get on with it.
Yeah.
Right. They love it.
Interesting. Yes. That's an interesting detail. Yeah.
Well, if you then take the red products off the green, off the big equipment, right?
Yeah.
You get a strange, because you're not running the red products, then you'll get less breakdowns, right, on that equipment, right? Because it's the red products that screw it up. Yeah. You'll get the settings and the standardizations on the greens will be much better because you're running the same things all the time, right?
Yeah.
So you get an impact on the green output rates by removing the reds off that equipment, right?
And the flow of materials get simplified as well.
Yeah,
right?
because now the team only needs to know the changeovers from product A, B to C, B to C. They don't need to know the changeovers for F, G, H, N, and Q, right?
Yeah.
Because they're not doing them anymore. Now, this is where you'll get a problem from the accountants, right? Because the accountants will say, but that line's no longer fully loaded. No, that's right. It's not fully loaded, but it runs a lot better. Well, every week it's running better, so it's getting even less loaded, right? And it costs us mega millions. So shouldn't we put the red products back on it? No, because just go back to what it was, right?
Yes.
What's more important now is, which is what happened with Kimberly-Clark, right, is now the price at cost of goods has gone down, right? Yes. Now, and there's a story in the book about a company I worked with where we did this. Now, let's talk with the salespeople and the accountants of how much of that extra margin are we going to give away to the customers in order to get more shelf space, in order to sell more product, in order to get more product on those lines that have now got the capacity.
Yes. You mean there is the opportunity to lower prices as well because cost went down. Yeah, of course.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And let's give some of that margin to the customers, right? So they want to stock and sell more of our product. Right? The company I work for called Commons of Norwich, which is the story in the book. We went, right, from an 11% market share to a 21% market share in the space of 2 years doing that, right? We killed our major competitor. Dead.
we might. What I found. I watched a couple of videos that you have on YouTube, or interviews with you that are on YouTube, and I found that your way of working deserves more recognition. I think you developed a 5-day standard workshop with your clients that you do to get the thinking in the company established in the company, the kind of logic we went through, the concepts we went through in this conversation as well. So you, in a way, you came up with this idea that you need a 5-day, 1 week workshop with a relevant team at the client, and then they can set it up and they can give it a go. Period.
Yep.
No, and you usually do not have to come back so often, right?
No.
So you might do a review after half a year, but that's
not normally.
And does with that team, does that team disseminate the knowledge from? Do they teach the others and kind of be?
It depends on the company, Brian. I mean, I can think of a biscuit factory, Lou Biscuits in Poland, where they had 10 lines, and we ran one workshop and one line. And they then rolled it out across all 10 lines very, very successfully.
They did it by themselves.
Yes. And one of those lines, I knew the products on it, it only ran for 2 days every 2 weeks. That's all they needed it for. And I can remember the works manager, Roman Sitko, saying to me, "Oh, by the way, we finally got it out on that last line." I said, "But that line only ran 2 days every 2 weeks." "Yep, runs 1 day every week now." I said, "Roman, I would not have done that." "Oh, no, we believe in RFSE." And he said, "It took us 3 months to get it back to the efficiency that it was before, but we've done it now, and now it's getting better and better and better, as we knew it would. But it always runs the same day every week, 1 day now."
Right? And that all that is only possible if you stop believing that OEE or machine utilization is a thing. It is not a thing anymore, right?
Yes.
Complexity kills
measuring. But OEE is a result. OEE is like sticking the thermometer in your mouth to get the temperature right. Having OEE as the top measure in production is not going to improve performance, right?
It only tells you when you have to invest more, right?
It tells you what happened last week, right? Which you can't do anything about. To me, the most important measure is conformance to plan, right? Mm-hmm. Production's #1 requirement is make the bloody plan, right?
Conformance to slots, right? Conformance to cycle and the slots. That's what you call conformance.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Because if you look at why the production plan changes, right? Yes. Everybody tells you it's because of the customer. Bullshit, absolute bullshit. It's rarely due to the customer because you've got blooming weeks of finished goods stocks. So it can't be the customer. It's normally production. Something goes wrong in production, right? They make too much, they make too little, right? The machines break down, they haven't got the right materials, whatever, right? Yeah. So if you can improve your conformance to plan, you remove one of the great variabilities that's happening, right? Now, if you increase your conformance to plan, I guarantee you your OEEs will go up as well, right? It's just a mathematical fact, right?
Yes.
The better the conformance to plan, the better the OEE. So they'll go up as well. Yeah. Now, long time ago, right, I believed it. I measure conformance to plan as for all the different products, what's the quantity you need to make? So if you make more than the quantity for that product, it's a negative. If you make less than the quantity for that product, it's a negative. So overproduction and underproduction both count against you. Yes. Production hate it, right? They hate that number. Yeah. So then it's expressed as a % of 100, right? So you made a bit more of product A, you made a bit more less of product B, right? 5% more, 5% less. Overall, you're at 90%. Right, because you made 5% too much and 5% too little, right? 90%. I never believed that you could hit 100% conformance to plan. So every product made exactly to the quantity planned. I didn't believe it was possible until I saw it happen, right? And it happened in a factory that I was responsible for, right? And I just couldn't get my head around it. Can I finish the story on this one, right? So I went down to the factory and I said, okay, this factory made 69 products, right? 69. Where have you hidden it? They said, hidden what in? I said, you know how important it is to be conformance to plan. You've made a little bit more of every product and you've hidden it. You've not declared it. So you could declare 100% conformance to plan just to wind me up. And they said, okay, we have. We did. I said, now, if you can control it that well, do it for real. Took them another couple of months, but they did it for real. I've seen it in other factories as well now. Production hitting 100% conformance to plan. You think about the impact of that, right, on efficiencies and what it means to the supply chain, what it means to, what inventories you need to hold, enormous impact. And it can be done. It can be done.
And it can be done without the steering, without the overhead, without the constant coordination by managers.
Absolutely. It's all down to the drumbeat, right? Yeah. And the fixation of, holding that fixed plan, right, for the greens, right?
Yes.
Not allowing anyone, right, to disturb it, right? I've had, when I used to be employed, as I like to say, my wife said, Ian, you're making this big thing out that RFS is about people. Yeah. Well, how come when you change jobs, move to another factory or another company, even, after about 3 or 4 months, suddenly you're firing people? If it's all about people, well, they kept breaking the plan. They kept disturbing the plan. And I kept explaining it to them. You shouldn't do that anymore, but they wouldn't listen, and they had to go. They had to go, right? And I never had it that the rest of the people complained. In fact, the rest of the people rejoiced because they're saying, thank goodness, because that person kept ruining our repeating schedule.
Yes, yes. I think at my clients, I like to say that the idea of moving to such a system with RFS, cell structure design, value creation flow, actual flow instead of steering, you should never aim at reducing staff or reducing personnel, but it might be necessary that some people return to value creation, that they return to the actual value creating work, which then would increase capacity as well, So there are so many ways to use this.
Well, there's also, I mean, once you've got the fixed cycle running in your own factory, right, or what you control, then there's an enormous job to start rolling it out to the suppliers and to the customers. An enormous job in educating them what it is, showing them what it's capable of, showing them what benefits it will be to them. So there's a huge amount of work to be done to optimize the totality of what you can achieve, right? So you need to retrain the people on how to go out to the customers and the suppliers to educate them and help them, which is what Toyota did. Because the guy, I told you about that I was having a beer with, Wata, who first explained to me what the 5 steps of leveling were, right? That was his job in Toyota. His job in Toyota was to explain to the suppliers what they needed to do, right? Because they were never going to get it on their own. They were never going to come up with it on their own, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of work to be done, but it needs retraining of the people to be able to do it, yeah? But the good thing is, once people have experienced this for themselves, in the planning department, in the factory, and or purchasing and everything, right, they get so enthusiastic about it. And for me, that's probably the most important part when they go to talk to suppliers and customers, that they're so enthusiastic about what they're talking about, right? The people will listen to it, and get it. I can remember once being joining this company, and the MD was had this wonderful big project that was going to transform the company, and he was doing sessions, to brief all the different employees in the company about this wonderful project he got, right?
Yeah.
So he ran these briefing sessions, I don't know how many, 10 or more, right? And he stood there up the front with his PowerPoint, right, with a script, reading a script. And I just thought, and he's literally reading it line by line.
How not to do it. Yes.
Yeah. And I looked at everybody in the room and their eyes were going like they're falling asleep. Like, if you can't stand there and talk about this without a script and talk about it without passion, right, then it ain't going to work. No.
Yeah.
Whereas if they can go and they are enthusiastic and have a passion for it, then people will start saying, hey, there might be something in this if it changes them.
Yeah. I see the enthusiasm.
I've had it where, I mean, there's a biscuit factory in Belgium, huge biscuit factory, Kraft site, huge. And I ran one workshop there, and then the plant manager asked me back to run a second workshop. And then he asked me back to run a third workshop. I said, hey, Jacob.
Something's wrong.
People know what to do, right? You don't need me to tell them what to do. And he looked at me and said, Ian, I'm not hiring you to come in and explain RFS to them. I'm hiring you because you're the only person I know that can get them so enthused and motivated and up for doing this, right? So I'm hiring you to get the energy levels up, not teach them the concepts.
You're a motivational speaker.
Yes.
Ian, you've worked with several of gigantic companies over the time. I mean, we mentioned some of them written on the back here: Carlsberg, Philip Morris. You mentioned Kraft Foods. Once you get Lean RFS adopted at one plant that these companies have, does it spread or does it not so easily spread? What's your observation, your guess, or your hunch, or your
okay?
Not sure if you have data, but you've been doing this for decades, so you get a hunch, right?
It's relatively easy. In the companies where they successfully do roll it out, right, I think there's two factors. I mean, there's probably more than two, but two main ones. Right? The first one is there is somebody right high up, right? Ideally, the chief executive, right, but very high, or the VP manufacturing and supply chain, right, who absolutely believes in it and absolutely will support it, right, and not do anything that goes against it. The second.
So you mean you need somebody? So that means there needs to be somebody relatively high up in the hierarchy
for rolling it out, right? Rolling it out. Right? Now, the company we've been talking about that you're working with, right? The site director there, I can name her, Andrea, right? She's deliberately kept it quiet what she's doing because she hasn't got that top support yet. And she knows that if they knew what she was doing, they might not be so pleased about it, right? So she's building her case by getting better and better and better. So she can eventually go, ta-da, this is why we're running better now, right? And get that support in hindsight, if you like. So you asked about rolling out of many, many sites. Right?
Yeah, does it spread to other sites?
It doesn't spread without help, right? So that's where I will, they will pick maybe 4 or 5 or even 6 people who are very enthusiastic about it, who understand it really, really well. And I will then work with them to help them develop their own 5-day workshops, right? And then
so you help your clients to run these 5-day workshops that you do the first time that they can do it.
And then they pay me a royalty fee. My wife loves it, So once you've done that, at first she was very worried. Say, but if they run their own workshops, you're not going to be running workshops. No, but they'll pay me a licensing fee every time they run one. So I don't have to do anything, right? That's the best money of all, right?
Yes.
So
and they can
use the for instance. I can name Mondelez because they're quite open about it. They've got the high management support very strongly indeed, right? And they've got a team of people in there that know how to run 5-day workshops. So they go around the sites, right, helping them, implement it. And let's just talk a second about 5-day workshops. Why 5-day workshops? The second time I went out to Japan was to learn about Kaizen events, right? So a Kaizen event is how they make fast improvements. They generally do it over 3 days, but to the manufacturing process itself, right? So
within the system.
I'm sorry.
Within the system.
And I took part in a supplier to Toyota that made engine mountings, right? So there was a team of us, some Europeans and Japanese working together, where they made one engine mounting every 6 minutes, 20 seconds with 2 operators. And our task was within 3 days to have that equipment making one engine mounting every 4 minutes, 30 seconds with 1 operator, right? That was, so we were improving the actual process of manufacture.
Yes.
When I came back, and the company I was working for, where I'd been struggling to get RFS working really well, by holding a meeting here and a meeting there, and all that. And all that ever happened was they talked about all the reasons why they couldn't do it.
Yes.
And I thought, why don't I use a Kaizen approach? Why don't I just? And then when I figured out what we needed to do, it came down to I needed 5 days, well, 4.5 days to be accurate, right? So I got a bunch of planners, managers, operators together, covered the concepts, did the analysis, looked at what needed to change, and say, right, by Friday, we'll be in a position to do this. Monday morning, we start. So doing it with a Kaizen 5-day approach, you build the enthusiasm, you build the energy, you build the commitment, right? And yes, on Tuesday afternoon, they tell you all the reasons why it can't be done.
Yes.
On Wednesday morning, they start saying, well, maybe we could do this, maybe we could sort of start here, sort of thing. And normally there's a changeover team working saying, well, we've got some ideas about how we could improve the changeover, because very often we increase the changeovers, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then Thursday morning is when you get breakthroughs happening. They've been thinking about it so long, over 3 days, suddenly saying, hey, why don't we do it like this? Why don't we? I mean, the changeover team will typically go from, we've made about a 5-minute improvement to we've taken 2.5 hours out of that changeover, and then by Friday, you've got about 25 people who are total and utter converts to it. And it's saying, we want to make this work because it's going to make our life better. Now, let me just explain that a little bit first. On Monday, when I explain the concepts, I get them to do a little brainstorm, right, in groups. And I say, I teach them why the current planning system is guaranteed to change the plan, right? It's fundamentally unstable. Teach them why. And I say, do you ever get, sort of short-term plan changes, firefighting? Oh, yeah, all the time. Plan changes every day, right? Yes. So I get them to brainstorm what's the positive and negative impact of short-term plan changes on people, customer service, continuous improvement, efficiencies and cost. Brainstorm lots of things. And I say, okay, so which side outweighs the other? Is it more positive or more negative that you get plan changes? And of course they say, much more negative. Right. Yes. So this isn't really a good way of working, is it? Right? Because you're all firefighting. Everybody's firefighting.
The best people become firefighters, right?
Exactly. Right. And they're the worst. Right. Yeah. So now I say, what if we had a system where we didn't change the plan? It was the same every week. Would that be better? Yes. Now, the point here is, number one, which surprised me, is that everybody thought they were the only ones suffering from firefighting. When they do it in these mixed groups, it's so you suffer from the firefighting as well. Yeah, I'm the planner. I work late every night because of the firefighting, right? Yeah. I'm the manager. I'm trying to deal with this chaos, whatever. So suddenly everyone realizes they're all suffering from firefighting. Right? Yeah. You've now got a common enemy, firefighting. And if you can reduce the firefighting, you will make their lives easier.
Everybody's life, really. Yeah.
And happier. And happier people are better operators. Doesn't matter whether it's the operator or the planner, whatever, right? Happier people are better operators. I say that a lot, right? A lot. So now they've got a common enemy, firefighting. It's no longer about the machines. It's no longer about efficiency. It's no longer about making the profits better for the company. It's about making their lives easier, right? That's important because now they're doing it for themselves, right? Now they're working together to come up with a common good. Oh, and by the way, efficiencies will go up and the profits will go up, etc., etc. But that's not the prime focus anymore. Now, most improvement, and a lot of people who talk lean, right, is all about the machines and efficiencies and profits, right?
Yes.
And for most people, it's like, I couldn't give a monkeys about that stuff. What's going to make my life easier? What's in it for me? Remember that famous expression? Yeah. What's in it for me? What's in it for you? RFS, your life is easier.
Everybody's life is easier. The client
workshop works. Sorry.
Yeah, it doesn't create losers. It only creates winners, which is an interesting. By the way, you mentioned the lean movement. Let me guess. Do you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me guess. The lean movement overall has not embraced your approach or the lean RFS approach as enthusiastically as you might have imagined decades ago.
Right. The answer to that is yes, but with a caveat. Right.
Yeah.
So the caveat is Dan Jones, Professor Dan Jones, who wrote all the most influential lean books along with Jim Womack.
Yes.
He absolutely has been a great mentor for mine. He published my first book. He wrote the foreword of that. He's been a very, very big pusher of it. And anytime he's worked with manufacturing companies, he said to them, you need to get Ian in, right? John Shook has been a very big supporter as well. John allowed me to publish the emails that he exchanged we had in the book, right? You know, to name him and word for word publish the emails, which was very, very helpful. So John, big, you know, positive.
Yes. And you won the Shingo Award as well.
That is struggling now to find any others. Right?
Yeah, so, yeah. No, what I mean is there are not too many people knocking on your door every day to let's say license the approach or to.
No,
I do not mean it as a criticism to your work, much the contrary.
No, but you have to realize. I mean, getting the books published would never have happened without Dan Jones. Right?
Yes,
never.
By the way, I'm toying with the idea of, but you will have to think about this. I will just tease you a little bit here. At this moment. I'm toying with the idea of making a book about lean RFS happening in German, a different style, more philosophical, maybe. Yeah,
we've got it. I think I've got it in Danish and Polish. I think you know.
Oh, very good.
I think the Polish Lean Institute did it. I need to. I mean, you know, and so you got to understand. It's a little bit about me, right? In so much as when I used to be employed, as I used to say, right, and was trying to, you know, as managing these huge projects, right, I had to do project, you know, project justification, project plan, monitor the plan, all this sort of stuff, and that boards the pants off me, quite frankly, right?
Yes,
that is not my skill set. Right?
Yes.
My wife used to say to me in the early days, you know, when I was struggling a bit, you know, you need to get out and market yourself more, etc. Well, luckily, it was Dan Jones that really pushed me to go independent, right? And he said, Ian, what I'll do is, you know, anytime I'm in a manufacturing company, I'll say you need to get Ian involved, and he was true to his word, right? So I was getting work, but it was all coming because of Dan, right? But you need to market yourself in. You can't just leave it up to Dan. I said, well, I don't like doing that really. I don't like it very much, sort of thing. And what started to happen was that I started doing some work for some big companies like Kimberly-Clark, for instance, right? And after they saw the success at a couple of sites, we want you to do more, please. I mean, I was looking up the other day, and Kraft got into it, and I was running workshops for Kraft all over the world, literally all over the world. And I did something like 39 workshops for Kraft, right, in a 2-year period.
Oh,
and
okay.
There was a point in my life where I was running like 4 to 5 workshops back to back, 5-day workshops. No, I'd be like, one of them would be in, South America. Then I'd come back, do one in Europe. Then I'd go and do one in USA. And, I was getting home late Friday night or early Saturday morning and leaving again on Sunday, right? Yeah. And it reached a point where my wife said to me, Ian, you're going to kill yourself. So I was getting so many workshops that I just didn't need to advertise or, as far as I was concerned, the best way, which is still the case, was word of mouth. Right now, got workshops being planned with 2 big companies in Denmark, a major soft drink supplier across Europe. Funnily enough, the company you've been talking about, there's other parts of that company now talking about wanting to run workshops. So
that's good. I'm happy to hear that.
No workshop for 2 years because of COVID, right?
Yeah.
Alison said, you're going to be back to where you were. You need to be careful you don't book too many workshops, put weeks, tell them that you're not available certain weeks. So my point being, I was running so many workshops, right, and word of mouth was happening that I just didn't need to advertise it. I didn't need to, for me, the big buzz was going in and doing a 5-day workshop, seeing people go from that will never work here to this is absolutely the right thing to do by Friday, right? That gives me such a personal big buzz. And to be frank with you, a fairly decent income, right? So it was like, who cares, if the main lean community hasn't grabbed this. Right?
Yeah. And there is practical adoption. Now I'm getting an even clearer picture that you have done hundreds of these workshops, so hundreds of sites. Yeah. And some of them might have adopted Lean RFS only on a certain production stream or line or whatever. Others might have done it fully in their whole plan. So the work has been highly effective, right?
Yeah, but others have done it successfully and then lost it, right? Because what happens is that over time people leave, retire, leave, whatever, and new ones come in, and they're still teaching batch logic at the universities, for goodness sake.
Yes.
They're still teaching, the algorithm economies of scale.
Economies of scale. Shit. Yes.
Yeah. And that's what all the planning software is still based on EOQs, So it needs strong people to keep it in place.
Yes.
Because otherwise it gets diluted, right? And it's this, it's this
and
thing.
One stupid person at the top can kill the whole system, right?
Oh God. When I get phone calls from people and they say, Ian, we've got a new manufacturing director. Oh God, no. Is he talking about we need back to basics? Yes, he is. Oh God, it's gonna go. You're gonna lose it. Because it's this, like I talked in the original time when I originally did it. Leaving the equipment stood idle, right? Or you brought up the thing of white space, which is the same thing.
Yeah.
For most people, that looks inefficient, leaving the equipment idle. What they don't realize is by leaving it idle, you can create the fixed cycle, which then gives you much, much better performance, right? So it's counterintuitive, totally counterintuitive. What seems a good way of doing things is not. Right.
Yeah. There's a real dogmatic shift between the idea of batch logic and flow logic, which we of course advocate, flow logic. Yeah. And batch logic forces you to optimize silly stuff like batch sizes, utilization.
Build bigger tanks. Don't build bigger tanks. Build smaller tanks.
Bigger racks, bigger workspaces, bigger everything. Right.
Yeah. Gonna need a bigger boat.
Yeah,
and it's still taught. That's
that was
still taught in universities and so on. Qualifications.
So it goes so against the conventional wisdom of things that it doesn't surprise me that the place can get it very successful and then lose it again, right? And I think the other thing is, right, I mean, a lot of this is psychology, right? To go against the conventional wisdom takes a lot of guts, right? I know because I've been going against it for just about all my working life, right? Most people will go with, the conventional wisdom, will go with the crowd, right? Even when they know it's wrong, right? I mean, there's lots of marvelous experiments we've done, like why do, atrocities happen in war? Why did soldiers go and do atrocities? Well, they've done lots of work to show if they're told by what they perceive as the boss to go and shoot all those villagers, that's exactly what they'll do, right? They won't stand there and say, well, I don't think this is a good idea, actually. Right? Oh, sorry, bang. You're the first. So it takes a lot of guts to stand up against the conventional wisdom. Yeah. And people get fired for it. I know I have been fired for it, right? So, and like Andrea, we talked about, I've talked to Andrea a lot, obviously, and she was deliberately taking a head below the surface head below the approach to get it running well, so she could then show it was good. I mean, she's one of these ones, that expression, right? It's easier to get forgiveness than permission.
Yes. And the larger the company, the larger the corporation, the more important this advice gets, right?
Yeah. And I used to, when I was doing this internally, when I was employed, I used to spend a lot of time trying to build my supporters, right, and get them more and more on board. And one of my biggest supporters, this Dr. Bill Walsh I mentioned earlier, he sent me to these various psychologists, right? So, go to these people, right, to learn how to manage better, these sorts of big changes. And this one psychologist taught me, I can't remember what it was called now, but anyway, right, what it was if you build your supporters, right, that's good. It's like a boat, right? You've got a boat, so you're building the engine, the power of the engine, and you're getting faster and faster. But if you ignore your detractors, they're like a big anchor, right, that's dragging the boat back. So it doesn't. Okay. So at some point, you're going to reach the point where the boat is at maximum power, but it's stopped still because the power of the engine is being outweighed by the anchor that's holding it back. And this psychologist said to me, now, what if you cut the rope that's tied to the anchor? What's going to happen to the boat? I said, it's going to fly off like billiard. Exactly. He said, you need to spend all your attention not on building your supporters, identifying, getting rid of your detractors, right?
Yes.
Because that will have a more powerful impact on what you're trying to achieve. So then I started work on identifying my detractors, right? And that's when my wife, I said to you earlier, said, well, how come when you join a company after 3 or 4 months, you're sacking people? That's why. Because these are people never going to change.
There's another hour here, Niels, I think.
It's very important. The psychology of it all, I think, Ian, the point you're making is perfect. And one, of course, we want to finish off this session in a couple of minutes. But
I think, to me, RFS is at least 50, I say to people, it's at least 50% psychology. Getting people to believe it's going to make their life better, right?
And what you just said, Ian, it relates beautifully to a moniker, let's say, a quote from one of our colleagues, Daniel Mesick, who says, work with the willing, ignore the unwilling.
Yeah.
It's very important for this kind of work, I think. Work with the willing, ignore the unwilling. And of course, the unwilling at a certain point might leave. It's okay. Well, people leave all the time. I would say that in a non-lean RFS system, good people leave all the time. In a lean RFS system, the not so good people will naturally have a tendency to an inclination to leave.
Yeah, and some of them will. I mean, like they say about people who smoke and quit smoking. People who quit smoking are the biggest advocate against not having smoking. Sort of thing. So I mean, I've had numerous workshops where I can remember one in Carlsberg, right? And their planner had been in the job for something like 28 years, right? You know, older guy, very fixed in his ways, absolutely believed he was, you know, doing exactly the right thing. He was on top of all the changes, you know, he could make changes so fast you wouldn't believe it. You know, he was really, and very dogmatic, absolutely dogmatic, you know, black and white. Everything was black and white as far as he was concerned. Come Friday and all the way through the week, he kept saying to me, you said that I'll get this by the end of the week. Yeah, I'm still not getting it. Right. I'll run it through again. I'll run it through you again. Right. Okay, fine. Come back in about half a day later. Still not getting it in. You know, can you just run me through it again?
Okay.
Anyway, Thursday afternoon, he got it, right? And he said, hey, fixed plan. You said I got to fix the plan for 8 weeks. Yeah, that's right. Okay. He said, what about 52 weeks? I said, well, that would be great, but I'm not sure you can fix it for 52 weeks. He says, I'm going to try. He says, if your fixed plan is important, he said, I think we can control it with the stocks. You know, I control the stocks. He said, if I allow the stocks to float, we could have a fixed plan. Right. Okay. So then on the Friday morning, they're presenting what the teams have done. And this guy presents the fixed schedule. Animated didn't even come into it. This guy was, he was known for being staid and boring and everything. And he was so animated with it. And the works director, I can't remember his name now, doesn't matter what his name, looked over and he said, what the hell have you done to him? And I knew, and I said, he's now going to be the biggest advocate for this, right? You know, nobody better change his fixed plan. Right? Yeah. So he switched. It's possible.
It is totally possible. By the way, I believe this is not only possible, it will become the standard. Sooner or later, this will be the standard of how to do production everywhere in the world.
Let me, one last thing. I've got something to show you.
Yeah.
Right?
Please.
Right. This, can I get it in the picture? Right. This is the original Toyota production system house, right?
Yeah.
Now, you see on the bottom, the foundation is called level production, right? Or Hyunka. That's the foundation system. It's a very simple diagram, right? That's the original, right? Now, when I met Awata, he showed me this and he said, what you're talking about is Hyunka or level production. And we had the conversations we talked about before, right? Yeah. And he then told me that that is 5 steps, starting with every product every 2 weeks, every product every week, etc. Right? I've seen hundreds of those diagrams in companies, right, that are doing lean, that I work with, hundreds of them. And their houses, they always draw a house with columns, right? And there's loads and loads of stuff in there: leadership, teamwork, you know, productivity improvements, SMED, hundreds of things in their house. And they normally have 4 columns or 5 columns, not 2, right?
Yes.
Loads and loads of stuff. And they have on the foundation lean leadership and loads of stuff in there, right? Yeah. Not one of those houses that the companies have produced to do a diagram of their lean transformation, not one has had Hyunka or level production on the foundation.
Yes.
Not one. Toyota only had level production as the foundation, and that to me is a message, right?
I think you have been the
right foundation.
Yeah, exactly, and you have been masterful in articulating a doable, understandable, doable, counterintuitive yet simple concept of how to achieve Hyunka or level production, and within just days, ultimately, right? Within a week or so.
Days.
So it's a very simple thing, and the Glenday sieve, the 6% that's 50%, right?
The way of distinguishing between the reds, the greens, and the reds, yes.
And I always say to companies before I run a workshop, don't send me the data, right? I don't want to know, right? Yeah. Surely you want to know, check that we're, right. No, I don't want to know. And most importantly, if you do the analysis, don't tell people in the business, right? Just have your raw data ready to do the analysis on Monday afternoon, right? So then everybody gets their spreadsheets and does their spreadsheets, everything like that. And then I'm waiting at the front. Okay, so what have we got?
Yeah.
Right? what percent of products are 50% of the volume? And somebody was saying, well, it's not working out for us. It's 6.5. Really? 6.5? You know, and every week it's like, yes, you know, because every week I know that's what it's going to be, right? You know,
Wow.
I've never get it that it's not, you know.
It's strange, right?
Sorry?
It's the Glenday law.
Yes,
It's the Glenday law.
and it's when they know I haven't seen the numbers and they know from my reaction, it's like oh right, okay, and they didn't know it, right? They didn't know it, so it's suddenly okay. So we're only talking about 6% of the products. Yes, that's
as always.
Yes. You know.
Ian,
Oh my gosh.
let me just Ryan, before we finish this off, I would like to at least hint at today is the happy day that we are officially launching the concept overview poster to your wonderful work and concept.
Right.
Ryan, if you can share it somehow, that would be great. So today is the official day that we are launching the concept overview, Lean RFS concept overview poster, which will be at the same time available in English and in German now. I think. Of course, I thought of my current client, one of that current client we mentioned. I think the company could use Lean RFS articulation more often and use something to hang it on walls and visualize the concept. So I thought of could this be made available a one-page overview of Lean RFS key concepts that we discussed, most of them on one sheet, one paper, one poster, and this is the outcome. So from today on, you can everybody in the world and I will send, of course, copies to you, Ian.
Thank you.
Everybody can use these in their work, and the idea, of course, is to make this available for free printout, so people can print it for themselves. But it can the poster can also be bought through the Red 42 web shop. So now
it's good. I like it.
Now people have the book. People can do your workshop, of course. With Ian Glenday, a 5-day workshop or 4.5-day workshop. You can read the book. You should read the book, and you might use the concept overview poster, to visualize and explain.
It's all on one page. Yeah,
just on one page. Yeah, and on the back you have the German version still. So
yeah, that's good. Yeah,
very useful. And maybe we take it to Kiswahili and Japanese at some point as well. Produce more translation. If people are up to this, to Danish, Polish, and so on.
Yeah.
Great. Ian, do you have something to add? Something more you want to mention? Ryan?
It's a very simple idea. Once you get the idea, once you realize that for just about every company there is, just 6% of your products makes up 50% of your volume, right? And 95% of your products is the other 50%. Why on earth are you planning and managing them the same way?
Yes.
Right? The greens and the reds need managing totally different ways.
Yes.
Repetitive for one, flexible for the other. And don't get them mixed up.
Yeah. Make production reliable, make it slotified.
Right.
You can get rid of the planning, basically, right? Wonderful. Beautiful.
Beautiful, wonderful. Love the groove. I love the tempo and organization that swings with its production. That's fantastic. All right, Ian, thank you so much. And Niels, we'll head back in the back room, and we will talk soon next week on BetaCodex Live, or actually it'll be a little bit in the future. So watch on our LinkedIn page. Thank you so much for the precious gift of your time and attention. We will see you when we see you.